Ounce of Prevention is sponsored by
I'm in charge of me, you're in charge of you. If you touch me without permission, I'm gonna tell on you.
All right, we're rolling. You became chief here in Westbrook.
Yes, I can.
For blue,
What do you think?
which is the, I think.
Lucifer, the light of heaven. That sinner never was forgiven. Banished to his lowly station till he checks out in Revelations. Why you keep up your life makes no sense to me. They made me a throne in heaven, and I picked hell for the company.
So hi and welcome to Ounce of Prevention. I'm Vickie Morgan and I'm joined today by Chief Janine Roberts of the Westbrook Police Department. Janine, thank you for being here.
Vickie, thank you.
We are going to have a little chat today about what exactly happens when you make a report of abuse in a community and basically how the police force gets involved and then what happens with the Child, Youth and Family Services and all that component of it. So thank you very much, Chief Roberts, for being here.
You're very welcome.
Can you tell me a little bit about your background and how long you've been a police officer and how you became chief here in Westbrook?
Yes, I can. I worked for the Portland Police Department for 29 years, from 1985 to 2014, and retired in the spring of 2014 as lieutenant, and held the position as lieutenant for 13 years, and did a lot of things in my 29 years because I'm an action person and like to do different things and make a difference for people's lives. And 3 months after retiring from Portland, Westbrook called me to see if I'd be interested in an interim chief's position while they figured out what to do with the public safety director position, overseeing both police, fire, and 911. And 9 months after taking the interim job, I got the permanent job, and it's been 2.5 years.
That's a very impressive career, so thank you for your service.
You're very welcome, my honor.
So what has your contact been with in your career? How much have you dealt with child abuse cases and that field of sexual abuse cases, child abuse, and those sorts of...
I haven't had a lot of first-person contact in that realm. As a patrol officer, patrol sergeant, patrol lieutenant, being in uniform, in the cruiser, on the street, responding to that initial call and working with my officers and myself when I was an officer to do the preliminary investigation to really, and what that typically entails is an officer responding to the location where the person has the information about what they know or perceive to be abusive situations for children, and then interviewing that person. Is there any evidence that might be collected? Is there a situation where the hospital might be involved? So working with the hospital staff and ultimately putting together that first basic report so that the detectives that work those types of cases are really focused on child abuse cases, that they would have a summary and some initial statements of what the details are. And certainly throughout the years, the societal response to child abuse and child sexual abuse has gotten much better in the realm of caring for our children and trying to minimize the vicarious trauma of having to repeat that so many different times, because you have to talk to the investigator, then you have to talk to the district attorney's office, and if DHHS is involved. So we actually have the Cumberland County Child Advocacy Center, and one of our detectives, Dan Violette, is on the board of the center, has been involved with its creation, and does handle all of the crimes against children here in Westbrook. So as the department, in responding to our city's needs, I think in some ways we are in advance of other departments because we have that in-house expert and someone that is really the right fit for the job.
So when a report is made, what do you do to reduce the trauma to the child that has been reported about? With the interviewing process, you said you try to cut down on the
So
questioning.
I always struggle with this word, advocacy center. Is just that. They have it set up so that it's scheduled, and the one or two people that interview the child are trained and typically are experts in their field, but the other representatives of the different pieces of the system that need to hear that or want information from that child are in a room where they can observe the interview. And as the interview goes on, if there are additional questions that need to be asked, then there's communication, then they might take a break, and then the interviewers step out and talk to those that are observing. So everybody gets their needs kind of met right then. And if there are disclosures, then they can strategize, do we need more information? And then once they have what they think they need, then we as a system for the criminal justice side of things can focus on pulling the evidence together in order to hold the abuser accountable. And then there's also the component of the care for the child and what services can we connect the child and the adult caregivers to in order to try to minimize the trauma as the child continues to grow.
So in terms of a perpetrator or an alleged perpetrator, at what point are they included in the investigation? Like, I know there is a hesitation to report abuse sometimes because they're afraid that you're just going to go to this person's house and just go after them right away. It seems like there's a process long before anyone has ever questioned about a crime.
Yes, I mean, in each case is different. Certainly if there is a increased risk to the child because the abuser is still in their life, and that might speed things up. And also, what's the severity of the injury and the assault to the child? And especially if it's a sexual assault and significant, and that abuser is still in the child's life, then we want to move quickly to arrest that individual. And certainly working with the child and the caregivers to surround them with whatever protection might be needed. But we certainly do not go immediately, we talk to the child and then go talk to the abuser. There is, again, as our society has evolved in the last 20 years or so, we address this societal concern very differently than we did in the 80s. And it was really focused around the safety and the well-being of the child, not only during the investigation, but also the future for him or her.
So in terms of reporting, there are two options in the state. You can call a non-emergency number at a local police department, or you can report directly to Child, Youth and Family Services. So what would be your recommendation in terms of the most effective route? What is the chain of command there with a report?
The most effective route and timely route is calling your local police department. Because once you refer to DHHS, it has to go through, typically you call an 800 number, and then that gets sent to a caseworker or a supervisor, and then they would send the referral to the police department. That can take a couple of days or longer. And so if you call the police department on the non-emergency number, or if you feel that it's more of an emergency because it's happening at that time, dialing 911, we respond pretty much immediately. Even if you dial the 7-digit non-emergency, it's going into our dispatch center, so it's a call for service logged then and there. And the patrol officers working the shift would be assigned the call to go out and investigate. And if it's something where the person that wants to report with their concerns, and again, whether they know it because they witnessed it or they just suspect it, they can come to the police department. They could call us and talk to not just a dispatcher, but say, ultimately we're going to want to talk to you in person, especially if you're a witness or have some specific information that's going to help us pull a case together. With the primary goal is the children, is the child that's involved. Our children are a precious commodity in our future. And the dynamic of how the trauma of being abused impacts our psyche and our mental well-being, our physical well-being for the rest of our lives if we are not able to access the best services to help us live with what happened, as well as how to grow beyond it.
So you've had an extensive career in law enforcement, and I think it's pretty well accepted that when a child is abused, the repercussions last for years, and it can show up with addictions, it can show up with cycles of violence that just continue to keep repeating themselves. What do you think the impact is? What have you seen? What's your impression? What is the impact of child abuse in a community?
In the long term, it's a variety of ways to, as you mentioned, there's those that turn to violence themselves, those that self-medicate to to basically avoid whatever pain they're experiencing as a result. Mental illness is also a component that can be wrapped into that. And as our society grows because of our numbers, because of birth rates, to the volume of ACEs, and specifically child physical abuse and sexual abuse, those numbers inherently increase. And we don't have the resource, we don't have the funds to have a level of resources that we need. So looking at the grassroots approach to helping our parents that are struggling to be parents, that may not have had the best childhood themselves, and having different programs that are out there, having neighbor to neighbor able to support and help in growing in the dynamic of, once you have that relationship and you're stressed that child is sick or crying or not behaving and you've done everything right. We also have those parents that do everything right, and there's many times where the abuse isn't happening in the home. It's happening elsewhere. Right. So there's so many different factors that go into this particular issue that there's no easy fix, as we know. Hence why you have created Empower and why you want to take this movement and help our parents and the adults that are in children's lives, not only to help us develop the skills so we're not abusive, but also that when we see the abuse or suspect the abuse, that we have the courage to speak up. That, and thinking about the child and the dynamic that with somebody calling a police department to report what they suspect to be abuse, that is doing the right thing. And it's when it's really based on perception, as opposed to there are those circumstances where allegation of child abuse will be used as in a relationship breakup or a divorce, that the false allegations used against one parent to the other or something like that, and even those false allegations we investigate, and although it doesn't have a physical impact on the child, but it certainly plays into the child's psyche of mom and dad fighting over me, or mom and mom, or dad. So, but the reality is that we do have a significant child abuse issue nationally and probably worldwide.
The numbers in Maine, close to 20,000 cases are reported in the state of Maine, and that hasn't really changed or very much at all. And just in Cumberland County, there's about 2,600 cases.
And that's on an annual mean?
That's an annual rate. And then the kind of number that's bounced around is that there are about 90% of the cases are never reported, which is staggering. I mean, that's a lot of children who are being abused, and people are not. And I think there are definitely visible signs sometimes when these things are going on. And I have to thank the Westbrook Police Department, because we teach stewards of children, and when we were trying to find places to hold that class, which is a child sexual abuse prevention class, Westbrook was the first immediate response that we got right away. They said, where you guys came back and said, absolutely, when can you come in? And the community responded really well, and we had a class here, and we'll probably have another one probably later on in the summer. But that class talks about the fear of being wrong. When you want to make a report, there's fear of reprisal from an alleged perpetrator. There's also fear of, what if I'm wrong, and how do you respond to that? I know what we teach, but how would you respond to that?
Right, you catch me off guard here, but my thinking on my feet, I would say, what if you're right?
Exactly.
It's a risk you take, and we make decisions every day in our lives, whether we're consciously aware of our choices or just it's automatic, but the dynamic that there are risks, and there's a lot of things that don't get reported in addition to child abuse, because of the fear of retaliation, the fear of being ostracized yourself, social media. We talked briefly I believe it was off camera in regards to the modern day TV shows and that impact and the heightened fear of really physical harm as opposed to somebody just angry and spouting off. So, but I mean, the dynamic that most departments are going to proceed with an investigation and are not going to be looking to go to the district attorney's office and get a warrant in order to arrest and press the charges without having solid grounds there. So if it's just a preliminary, whether by the officer on the street and then the detective following up and saying, okay, we really don't have much here, then that's a report back to, hopefully, I would speak for my police department, that I expect my staff to provide that customer service when their schedule allows, given the priorities that they have, to communicate back to not only our victims in any type of crime, but to witnesses that are engaged, that not every witness wants to hear from us again, but if it's something significantly important in this type of case, you've put yourself out there if you are not an immediate family member. For us to follow up and provide as much of an update as we can, given the confidentiality and the privacy of the victim and what laws control what we give out for public information.
Something that kind of stands out for me too, another statistic that says 90% is that children 90% of the time know their abuser, and that means that this is someone who is probably in close contact with a child, and that phrase, it takes a village to raise a child, it actually takes a village to abuse a child. So when people stay silent, it actually helps the perpetrators keep access to the children, and the child is still suffering through this stuff. And it's easy to judge and sit back and say, oh, you should report, but what we do in Stewards of Children is we point out the fact that when you make a report, you are not making an accusation that Joe XYZ down the road did this. It's a request for professional service. I'm not expected to go across the street and talk to that guy and say, did you do this? I'm not expected to ask the child for details. I'm passing this over to a professional, and you guys are qualified to ask those questions and investigate in a proper manner. So, and that's what we tell people, is that you're asking for a service to be provided. It's not an accusation. And if you're afraid of reprisal from somebody, imagine what that child is going through, that they're in that situation, that they maybe nobody else will speak up for them. So in terms of reports that you guys get when it's not a divorce gone ugly, do you find it frustrating in your job to have a report that turns up nothing, where a child doesn't disclose?
It's not so much frustrating. I mean, it's frustrating, and let me back up and say what I think I heard you say in the question is that last piece, the child doesn't disclose. So they believe that it happened, but for some reason the child is still maintaining that secret. It is very challenging and frustrating in the sense that the compassion and the empathy that we officers have for any victim, especially a child victim, and to have an adult have that level of control over the child and influence and manipulative in that regards, and it definitely will bother officers, and I'm sure officers that work on those cases lose sleep at night, and even the ones where they are able to catch the perpetrator because of the dynamics and the trauma and the damage to the children involved.
The police force is not able to prevent every single crime. Most times you're called in the aftermath. So what is your vision as for child abuse prevention? What would you like to see happen in terms of things in the community and things that your police force is able to do to prevent and to help, to put the resources out there so that it doesn't happen, that families have the resources they need, they're not in a position where the stress leads to abuse or those types of things? What would you like to see happen?
A broader community approach and awareness. I have long developed one philosophy, many of them, but one is we will not enforce our way out of societal's problems. Can't do it. So in today's 21st century policing, you see much more of the collaborative work, and it's definitely my style of creating those relationships and partnerships within the community so that my frontline officers have the knowledge and hopefully the contact information for what resources are out there. Because they're the ones that are engaging, whether it's reactive or proactive, to individuals and families that need help. So turning towards not only the typical service providers, the DHHS and hospitals and police departments, but our faith-based groups, our neighborhood organizations, our public health within the cities, and bringing in even like some of the bigger business, like for Westbrook, Arcadia Insurance or Unum, although Unum is actually in Portland, they participate in a couple of other collaboratives that we have in Westbrook related to the heroin epidemic, IDEX. So, and even some of the smaller businesses, the Chamber of Commerce, how do you bring those types of community members into a group conversation to raise the awareness? I would say in the broader sense of child services, working with the school department. The police department actually has a community policing coordinator position that I mirrored it from my experiences in Portland. Certainly DHHS, we have, and working with the faith-based groups. In Westbrook there's the Children's Cabinet, which is focused on I believe it's focused on the education for children, and then Opportunity Alliance is the broader conglomerate that is a backbone organization for community partnerships for protecting children, which is across 6 or 7 community, actually across the state now, but specifically to Cumberland County, Westbrook, Portland, South Portland, Bridgeton, off the top of my head. So having that network and resources that tie into therapy connections to whether it's the children that develop the mental health dynamics of behavioral issues, as well as the parenting skills and babysitting skills and things like that, that the programs that are out there are typically connected through these representatives in organizations. And it's an area where, because of my personality being, I want to meet as many people as I can, and use those connections to help others, that the CPPC coming to Westbrook, it was here before I came on board. However, the relationship that I have with the director of that particular collaborative, Deb Dunlap, has really made it much stronger here in Westbrook because of using the network to really pull together.
CPPC has been really fantastic with Empower and Stewards of Children. They let us access their lists and stuff like that to let them know about classes. They're a fantastic organization.
Yes, and they're truly faith-based. I mean, the mission statement is together we keep children and their families safe, engaged, and thriving. Right.
And the goal, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but the goal in this state especially is not to rip children away from their families. It's to keep them in their families, which is really where they'll thrive, hopefully. And after all these years, you would think that you'd be jaded and kind of angry about this abuse that happens, but you seem like you still have a pretty open mind about therapy and reconciliation and things that help people get back on track. What would be your advice for a young family that's afraid, they're not sure where to turn? What would you tell them?
I would say probably one of the easiest things would be to dial 911. That's going to be 211. And just really talk to somebody, or call in 774-HELP for that crisis hotline. Even if you're not in crisis, they have at their fingertips in that computer a database of, sometimes, depending on what particular topic, it could be 500 plus resources available. So, and it's anonymous. You don't even have to give a different first name. And depending on if somebody has a faith that they rely on, reaching out to the trusted individuals in that regards, and knowing that there are resources out there, and especially as much as DHHS is seen as the government coming in and taking my children away, they do a lot of preventative work as well, and using that resource to help gain the skills. And a lot of it is really the desire in some ways, because I don't know what the percentage is, but there's certainly a percentage of parents that are living with use disorders themselves, probably are victimized in different ways as youth, maybe as adults. So when you're living and that's your life and your exposure and your experience, it's not easy at all to do what we're describing. So in that sense, having that outside help, somebody that you can make, actually was in training just the last 2 days, in a quote, I don't know who the author of this quote is, but it really struck me, and that is, we move at the speed of trust.
Wow.
And
Well,
we need in this topic, we need to gain the trust
absolutely.
of the children that are living with this type of atrocities committed upon them, and we need to gain the trust of those that love them, as well as those that are potentially the abusers, to find a way to stop.
So joking around with the kid and saying, if you do that, I'm going to call the police. It's not, I mean, we want to build up an image of the police that they're there to help. And when to my knowledge, if you were to call to to ask for help, it's not a matter of, now we've got your number, we know you're at risk now. Like, it's not, that's not the case.
It is not it at all. And it's very frustrating to hear parents say that. And it's happened several times throughout my career. And I usually, for years now, I don't remember when I started it, but for years, I will typically engage the child and tell them that that's not necessarily the case. You know, and try to make that friendly, even scooching down and talking to them.
At their level.
Exactly, at their level. It's, first of all, I stand 6 feet, so I tend to be imposing in uniform anyway. But it's truly separate from a parent using that as a quick tool to try to get the child to behave. The relationships that I and my officers create in the community, whether it's a Kids Safety Day over here at Hannaford and Saco Bit of a Savings, or it's the National Night Out event that's being held in the Brown Street neighborhood. We have an open house here for public safety tomorrow, as a matter of fact. And those type of community events, or the one-on-one where the officer's out. Say one of my younger officers was out this past summer and decided to try to show off on a skateboard. It didn't work out well for him. But kudos for him for trying to make a real connection with the youth, but just stay off the skate. I need you healthy.
Right. More peace.
Yes. But we as officers, as public servants, we have an opportunity when we have those non-crisis situations, and certainly the crisis situations, but the casual contacts, to let the children know that we are friendly, we're here to help, as well as to hold you accountable. You know?
Right. And there's someone to call if somebody's doing something bad to you.
Yes.
But even the trick-or-treating, that you guys hold here in October is Westbrook, in my experience, has been cutting edge with proactive, preventative work in the community and being out there meeting people on the ground level and the grassroots initiatives and all those things. So I have to thank you for agreeing to do this and for hosting our Stewards of Children earlier this year.
You're welcome welcome to partner with you, and look forward to doing more of it.
Well, it's really nice to be able to put a face to the name, to see, like, this is the chief of police in Westbrook, and she's awesome, and she likes kids, and she's not up to grab onto somebody if they need help. I mean, that's just not, if you can have this approach to your job after all the years on the force, I mean, that's just commendable, and thank you again for your service.
You're very welcome.
And thank you for being on Answer Prevention, and I wish you all the best in the rest of your career, and I look forward to working with you more to have these initiatives in Westbrook, and thank you for all that you do.
Well, again, you're very welcome. It is my honor to serve, and making a difference in people's lives is what motivates me. So it's a win-win situation.
Well, it works out. It works out to be on the other end of it too. So thank you.
Vanished to his lowly station till he checks out in Revelations. Why